Good morning, that's Karen Corda. And Minister, you know that we already had a debate on many of these issues on Tuesday night, so I want to expand my comments to, I suppose, address some of the issues within the system. You know, Minister, that not every school is the same. And so in some schools, as has been mentioned already, you'll have a cohort of students that are particularly vulnerable, particularly needy. They may be intergenerational educational disadvantage. There may be addiction issues. You may have a higher proportion of traveller children, a higher proportion of migrant children, a higher proportion of children who have just arrived from the Ukraine, for example, a higher proportion of Roma children, and a variety of different issues that the school has to deal with. And also within that school, there can be a higher proportion of children who are under the 30th percentile. And so all of these allocated resources that you will be afforded will be used in that way to deal with the scenario that is in front of you the best way that you can. And there may be a child within that scenario who may be at the 50th percentile, but could be at the 90th percentile with certain appropriate interventions. However, a different school may have the scenario that, and I know this to be true, that the lowest performing child in terms of reading capability in that school could be at the 88th percentile, and that child will get resources because of the baseline of resources that all schools get. Now, this is something that I think social inclusion and the NCSC need to address properly, because the child who is, as I say, at the 50th and could be at the 90th, and the difference of that intervention that could make in that child's life over the course of that child's life could be so fundamental and could be absolutely life transforming. But the resources of the school can't afford themselves to benefit that child because there's so many needs happening within that school, whereas that very same scenario in a different school would be addressed. And I think we have to have not just a baseline of support for every school, but a baseline of support for every child when we recognise that that intervention of jumping from the 50th to the 90th would make a massive difference in that child's life. Because, as you know, Minister, we have an education system which is based on choice. Choice means competition, and when you have competition, you effectively have a system that some schools, unfortunately, do not have have a greater level of disadvantage than others. Within the school system, Minister, the role of the SENCO, the Special Educational Needs Coordinator, I think needs to be greater supported, and I think almost needs to have the same sort of status within the school as a career guidance teacher, because the number of agencies that they're dealing with, the amount of timetabling that they have to do, the phone calls they have to make, the assessments they have to follow up on, is quite onerous. And I think if we were to, I suppose, to support that position more, we would have a position within schools where resources were allocated better and much more streamlined. You wouldn't have the scenario, as has been explained to me, of paperwork being clogged up about basic applications for laptops, which can sometimes take 3 to 4 months in order to be processed. And all these type of things are the daily grind for people in this position. And nobody in your position or in the NCSC or in the Department of Education wants to deny somebody that the resource that they're deserving of. But I think the recognition of that position needs to be properly recognised, as I say. Now, as has already been mentioned about SNAs, again, we come back and back and back to this discussion about special needs assistance. It's still being regarded by the department as a scheme, as a short-term scheme 20 years on. And the recognition of of qualifications, etc., goes directly to that type of respect or otherwise that the SNAs themselves feel that they don't get from the department. Again, this also comes into the narrative when we've spoken again about the need for the allocation of SNAs to be made much earlier every year. Look, we've spoken about how late it was this year. But again, it's that recognition of the position to be more than a scheme and actually be a career, which goes to the heart of the insecurity that they feel of and the lack of respect that their position gets. And again, you can point to the increased number of SNAs in the system. You can, and that's to your credit. However, in individual schools, again, said to me today, 54 students accessing 6 SNAs. 54 students accessing 6 SNAs. 6 into 54, if I remember my maths correctly, is 9. So 9 students effectively accessing 1 SNA. How could any SNA do that job effectively? Again, a lot of this comes back to class sizes. The fact that we have the highest class sizes in Europe. You know, how can a teacher or an SNA effectively deal with the variety of educational needs that a class will have when so many of the duties of an SNA do dip into the educational format or educational area because the class is so large and the needs are so great and the teacher can only do so much. And so what the SNA is supposed to be doing or trained to be doing is charged with doing dips into other areas because of the level of workload that's there in the classroom. Deaf children or children with hearing loss, Minister, I believe there's about 5,000 of them in the system. What their advocates are saying to me is that there needs to be greater awareness, greater training for teachers and indeed SNAs as well in dealing with children who are deaf or who are hard of hearing or who are suffering hearing loss because they are not performing as their peers are performing. And that's not because of any academic failing on their part, it's because the support isn't there or the awareness isn't there or the empowerment of teachers isn't there. And I think that's something that your department could absolutely address. We're still being governed by a 5-year-old circular 13 of 2017. And again, it's said to me by principals that they find it extremely challenging when in their schools that only children who are in treatment programs with disability teams can get allocation of resources. But if you have been diagnosed and your child, the child is awaiting treatment from a disability team, they cannot get resources. And this is what's being said to me. So I'd be interested in hearing your view on that. And again, as has been said on Tuesday night and again today, data. This is fundamentally where we are, where the challenge is with the NCSC. And you are right, I met John Carney, the new CEO of the NCSC. I appreciate his dynamism and his new approach to finding solutions. But again, I think the NCSC would be better served if they had more data, more recognition of the actual need on a regional basis. So we're not dealing with a firefighting scenario every year. We can project 5 years hence and 10 years hence. And that, Minister, you don't want to be here, and I'm sure many members of the opposition don't want to be here every given June having the same argument or same frustration around school places. And I think what comes to my mind when it comes to this whole debate is this word insecurity. Because, as I said on Tuesday night, if there's a child in your family with a diagnosis that you're trying to grapple with, it's the insecurity of knowing when the assessment is going to be, the insecurity of knowing when the intervention is going to be, when the OT is going to happen, when the speech and language is going to happen, the insecurity of knowing if you're going to get a school place, and then the insecurity of those who are actually working in the system as to whether they're going to be able to properly empower that child, the insecurity of the career path of the SNA. And the insecurity of the person who's charged with overseeing all of this within the school system, as to whether they actually have the time and space within the school diary to do it. Because there's all these various different overlapping agencies that they have to contend with every day of the week. And it is challenging. And then, as I speak to again, and look, every school deserves resources. I'm not in any way suggesting that schools don't. And, fair play to private schools for, opening up their schools to other children. I'm delighted. But when it comes to schools of intense disadvantage, we have to recognise that those children who are not, if you like, in the siren zone, as you might call it, or in the extremely vulnerable position of being under the 30th percentile, but are progressing okay, but could progress so much better, they are deserving of that help as much as you might suggest a middle-class child is. And that is a real challenge for us. And I know you're going to agree with me
that we can find solutions to that. But it has to be recognised by social inclusion working better and more hand in glove with the NCSE on finding solutions to that.